This is scene 9, and I want to discuss a little bit about my activities in the industry program. I named it Oklahoma State Industries. It has, since I retired, changed its name to Oklahoma Correctional Industries. In the Oklahoma Correctional State Industries, we called it OSI, I became involved with other states' industry programs from the standpoint of visiting their programs and they coming to visit my programs to learn about how we go about operating them. I became very good friends with many other administrators of correctional industries throughout the United States and Canada, and I was able to visit many states while I attended national conventions. I was a national officer in the Industry Association, Correctional Industry Association of the United States and Canada, and I went through several offices and later on became chairman of the board of directors of the association. And I have been recognized for my activities in that national association through the award of the President's Award for my contributions. And I also have received several plaques from other states for my contributions to their programs and help for them. I'm very proud of the fact that I was honored twice by the Oklahoma House of Representatives for what we were able to accomplish in the industry program. These were, I was also honored by the recognition by the Board of Corrections for my contributions to the Department of Corrections over the 24 years that I worked for them. And there was a board that also oversaw some of our activities for a period of time that gave me a plaque in recognition for my services. So I really appreciate all of those recognitions, and it was a labor of love that I was able to get those awards. I also formed the charter membership of the Regional Correctional Association, which included the states of Kansas, Arkansas, Missouri, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado. I was chairman of that association, where we visited each state and shared our ideas and once a year. And so I think that pretty much wraps up what I want to discuss about the correctional industries operation. And I'll go on now to another subject area, and that would be my farming activities. John and I became involved, as I stated earlier, in the early 70s when my father retired, by buying a farm from him. And at the time, my father had 990 acres of land that he operated, and he So we bought that for $92,000. Land was relatively inexpensive back in those days. But of course, dollar was cheaper back in those days also. For the first several years, John managed it, but when I moved to Norman, he said, "Max, I've been managing the operation of the farm for 3 years now. It's your turn." Well, it became my turn for 20-something years thereafter. My brother really had little interest in the farm. He gave me very good support in its operation and more or less gave me a completely free hand in managing the operation, which I appreciate. So when I became manager of the farm operation, Clyde Hickerson had been doing the custom work on our land, and we had been paying him for that work. And I decided that it would be better if we went into partnerships with Clyde, which we did, and we operated the farm with him actually doing all of the work and management of the operation of the farm, other than what was necessary for me to do from the financial standpoint and advising standpoint of Clyde. And he operated the farm from 1970s until the mid late 80s, and he was a very good farmer, and we operated on the basis of half and half of the profits or losses, and he contributed the labor and equipment and expertise, and we contributed the land. And so as even in the early the mid to late 70s, we started buying additional land. Our first purchase was 160 acres, and it was a strategic purchase because it joined two other pieces of land that we owned that was about 1.5 miles from the homestead farm. Later on, we added land, 40 acres in one place, 160 in another section, and 400 acres in another section. And all of these were strategic purchases in that they were adjacent to other farmland that we owned. We owned 80 acres south of the little town of McQueen, and we owned 160 acres south of Newberry that my father had purchased when he was still teaching in Field and Martha, before he even bought the farm operation from his father. So we eventually got to 1,750 acres of land. We bought this land when prices were relatively not expensive, but were getting more expensive. And it was turned out that it was a very risky buying that we undertook, because unbeknownst to us, the money that we had borrowed to buy the land from Federal Land Bank at a relatively low interest rate of 5 to 6%. Within a few years, with the Reagan administration, the interest rates went up to the extent that the interest payments were double and more of what we had originally set up to borrow, which made it impossible to make principal and interest payments. And particularly when commodity prices were also not very high, and of course with farming you have many ups and downs as far as the ability to generate money. And at times the interest payments were just more than I was even making as a salary. And so it got to, and at this point in time, of course John was making payments also, but John was an entrepreneur, and in addition to his very successful Amway business, and he was an airline pilot, he was making very good money back in the late 70s and 80s, and he was able to make payments. But one of his ventures was to buy a good section of land in the city of Dallas, and he and his buddies were building an excellent housing area, and they had made up this money, or this tract, in a beautiful setting, and laid out, put in all the pavement and everything, and they were selling the lots at a very high price, and everything was going good until this high interest rates occurred in the early 80s. Well, that hit them hard, and not only on payments they had to make because they had variable loans, but also people quit buying house tracts, housing, just like that, overnight. People stopped buying, but the bankers still wanted their money, of course, and they foreclosed on his land, which left him without any means of, he just lost a lot of money with that. He was able to retain a portion of it, and later on made some good money off of that land. But since he couldn't make his payments, I was still able to make mine, but just barely. And we had to put some of the land up for sale. And at the sale, there was a community building where the sale was held. People were just not bidding on buying the land, and they were waiting to try to get it real cheap, and we couldn't afford to sell it as cheap as they wanted to. So we were able to work out with the Federal Land Bank ability to forestall the foreclosure on our notes, and to work out a deal to where we could eventually pay off the loan. So it was a very close call that we could have lost a good part of the farm. That was a very, very tough time. This was in the mid-80s, and of course at that point in time, all of the kids were getting to the point of where they were either in college or about ready to go to college and getting married, and so it was a very, very hard time. Brenda had gone to work as a dental assistant, which she learned on the job for Dr. Wells, and she started working in that in the early 80s, and that was very fortunate that she did that work, because without her work and earning a salary, there's no way that we could have ever been able to keep the farm. We would have had to sold it. Fortunately, that all worked out, but not with a lot of concern and agonizing. When the farmland always had a lot of mesquites on it. A mesquite tree is well adapted to dry, hot weather. And mesquite trees were spread from South Texas all through the western part of Texas, Oklahoma, on up into Kansas, where the cattle were driven on cattle drives to the railroad terminal in Kansas to be shipped to Chicago. Well, the mesquite beans that come off of the mesquite tree, the cattle love to eat those, but in eating them, a lot of the seed passed through their digestive system, and they thereby planted mesquite trees all along that route. And so mesquite trees were very prevalent when my grandfather, this was in the late 1800s, these cattle drives were in 1860s and 70s, 80s, and so by the time my grandfather arrived to homestead the farm in 1900, they had a good start, and so he cleared out enough of the mesquites to get some of his land to where he could grow a crop on it, but there was still a lot of the land that had mesquites on it. So John and I decided we needed to get rid of the mesquites because they kept the grass from growing. They provided a shade where the grass couldn't grow. They used the moisture where the grass needed the moisture, and so the grass died out. And so we hiring somebody to grub out the mesquites was very expensive. So John found this crawler tractor that had been obsoleted by the highway department in Texas and hauled it up. He bought it for about $2,500. It was built in the 1940s, and he bought it in about 1980, and he brought that up to the farm, and I met him there on the farm, and he said he'll need to get this fixed up for grubbing. I don't know how you're going to do it, but and I said, well, do you know how to drive it? Because I've never done it. And he said, well, kind of. And he gave me about 5 minutes instruction, and I got on it and drove it around a little bit. And driving a crawler tractor it means that you steer with levers, and with brakes, and so that activates the brakes that control the tracks, and the tractor turns and according to which levers and brakes you push. So I found a local farmer, James Masters, who had an excellent machine shop, and he was a very good mechanic and was able to. He also was familiar with how to make a grubber, because he had done one for himself, and he used to and he grubbed out mesquites on his own. So, with James fixed up the tractor for where he could grub out mesquites, and I began grubbing out mesquites, and I did that over a period of 10 years or more, and I would go down on the weekends to do that. I would leave early, like I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drive the 165 miles from Norman to the farm and get there by sunup and work until sundown. And I'd do that Saturday and Sunday, and then drive back that evening on Sunday evening. And I did that off and on for many years. And so I figure eventually I grubbed out a square mile of mesquites with that old Crowder tractor. I didn't know anything about Crowder tractors or anything about diesel engines when I started doing that, but by the end of that period I had gone through from radiator to the rear end of the tractor doing work on it. That included a lot of work on the motor, the clutches, the tracks, and on and on. So I became an expert in maintenance, repair, and driving and operating the tractor. And then once I grubbed out most of the big ones, the tractor finally gave in to the point to where I could no longer repair it. It wasn't economical, and so I then started spraying the mesquites, and that was okay because the mesquites were very small. Some weren't but a foot or so high, so they were easy to spray. I initially started walking around with a spray can, spraying those mesquites. I finally wised up and got an ATV, an all-terrain vehicle, with a tank on it to where I could spray the chemical on the mesquite trees, kill them. So I was able to pretty well clear up the land of mesquites, and I kept meticulous records on the cattle that we were able to carry. We'd buy cattle, and when they were around 300 pounds, and we would buy them from sometimes distant states in order to get the best price on them and ship them in. And then we would put them on our wheat pasture, our native pasture, and they would grow to be in the 700-pound range, and we would sell them then and then buy more to replace them. So cattle sometimes made you a very good profit, but if you had bad luck with the life of pasture or diseases or other complications with the cattle or pricing problems, then it could be pretty bad. Each year, in order to buy, we typically buy about 300 to 400 head of stockers, and that would cost, my part of the cost, which was half of it, would be our cost, John and I's cost, would be around $75,000. So the bank would carry that loan for the year that we held the cattle, and then we would pay back the loan when we sold the cattle. So every year we were at risk of maybe not being able to buy. So when the 1980s and that high interest rates occurred, the Federal Land Bank quit loaning us money because they didn't think it was smart to, and they were right. So, because we were over our head, and so after we worked things out from the standpoint of being able to work with them on repaying the note, we began borrowing money from my father, who fortunately had some money to loan us because his income was more than his expenses, so he was a big help in loaning us money, which we eventually paid back. We paid him good interest on those loans, more than he could have gotten from any other source. So he didn't have a problem with loaning us money. He was very generous in that regard and helping us. So when I retired, I still, from the Department of Corrections in 2000, I still held on to the farm, but I wanted to go out and use my RV and see the United States and travel. And so in the meantime, I had, after Clyde worked our farm, another person by the name of Joe Garrison operated our farm, same conditions as with Clyde, for about 10 years. He was an excellent farmer. And then after him, a person by the name of Darren Brookman operated our farm for 10-15 years. And so I was very fortunate to have three capable farmers, ranchers, who were honest and worked well with me in managing and operating the farm. I continued to operate the farm when I retired for a few years, and then I decided I just wanted to rent it to Darren, and I had to have an income from it, and I did it under that kind of scheme for about 5 or 6 years until I got a call from a local realtor that wanted to sell my land, and I wasn't interested in selling it as such. I told him so because I was getting adequate income from the rental of the farm, and but he persisted and eventually found a person who wanted to buy it, and they were offering $400 an acre, and I thought that was a decent price until I started really looking into land values down there, and land was always inexpensive down there because it isn't a really good farming area. The drought and it sometimes lasts for years in a row, and the weather is very erratic. The air is dry. The Gulf Marshal very rarely gets into that part of the state, and so as a result, you only get around 25 inches of rain a year. Or in the eastern part of the state, you'll get 35 to 40 inches of rain. So, farming there and the land, some of it is good, but much of it is borderline. And so, unless you have good irrigated land, sometimes can be very difficult to make a living farming in that area. So it can sometimes be a very, very difficult venture. And so I was at this point in time, 2007, we finally, it was time to sell. And I eventually was able to get the price up to over $600 an acre. I think it was $700 an acre. And so that was my amount of my loan was very low at that point in time, and so I had a real good bank account from that. I was able to pay off everything that I owed from any loans or on the house or anything else, and still have quite a bit of money left to invest. And I'll get into that in the next thing.